Kev, how you doing this week?
Hey, John. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great, because we have a very special guest on the call with us right now. Is Andy Peck.
Andy.
Hi.
It's great to have you on the call. The reason that we're kind of sitting down to have the call a few weeks ago, if everybody who listens to the podcast remembers, I guess it was maybe about 4 episodes ago, something like that. Kev, you talked about some studio consulting and like going to some of our pro members' studios and going to see them and giving some feedback hands-on on location. And you guys can go back, listeners can go back and check out those podcasts on the feed. But Andy, you visited Andy's studio a little while ago. And so I kind of we wanted to get together and give a kind of recap about this. And we wanted to invite Andy on to talk a little bit from his perspective about that visit and about kind of what he's going on, what he's been working on, and that sort of thing. But first of all, how did the entire thing kind of come about? How did the idea of you going to Andy's studio and where did all of this kind of go from?
Andy, do you want me to kind of tell everybody? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, Andy's been coming to the MixCoach Experience Weekend for several years now, ever since the first year, right, Andy?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we were just talking about we were talking about the MixCoach Experience Weekend, and Andy and I were just talking about, what about me coming to his studio and sitting on his home turf and kind of giving him some I guess feedback or whatever on workflow, because sometimes you can't see like if you have your own studio, sometimes if somebody comes in, they form an instant opinion about, hey, what you ought to try is this and what anyway. So that's how that ended up. Is I ended up in South Bend, Indiana, by way of Chicago. And Andy, man, you've got such a cool studio, man. To be honest with you, I was not expecting it to be quite as vibey as it is. It's really cool in the fact, and we can talk about this a little bit more, but Andy's studio is built in a
1860
late 1800s,
yeah.
1860s building that is just like dripping with vibe. And the cool thing about his studio is it's really kind of old school as far as back if you've ever taken a tour of Studio B in Nashville, some of those really cool hit records were recorded in one room. It's back before everybody got so particular about ISO booths and stuff like that. And Andy's studio is all in one big, very tall ceiling, all brick, LEDs, and then I was listening to some of the tracks that you cut, Andy, and when I was soloing the tracks, I was kind of expecting to hear a lot of leakage but there was hardly any, and the vocal was standing in the room, and I was just I came back talking about your studio to John about how cool and vibey it was.
Yeah.
So tell me. So that's how it came about. So Andy, why don't you tell John and me and the guys listening a little bit about your studio? How did it come about, and what you put in there and all that stuff?
Yeah, I've actually had a studio since the early '80s, and it's seen many different forms. But recently, I found this old building in a small town of Niles, Michigan, and it really struck me because nothing's been done to this building for a very long time. It's very original. It's got the original brick walls. The ceilings are about 20 feet tall. And although it didn't fit what I was looking for in a studio, I couldn't see where I could put a control room or some ISO booths. There was something about it that just said, yeah, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I want to do. And I was a little reluctant because I'd never really worked in a studio without a control room before. And but I knew it had been done many, many times, and there's some benefits to it. Like better communication with musicians. And so I just embraced it. Rather than worrying about what people might think of it, I just tried to make it look as cool as I possibly could. And I knew I had some decent equipment and hopefully some ears to make it all work. So I just decided to put it all together. And so far it's been very successful.
That's really cool, man. So this 20-foot ceilings, like that's amazing. That is very appealing from an audio standpoint, and that sort of thing. In this space, how are you utilizing the space? Because it sounds like you're utilizing it incredibly well to be able to have everybody in the same place and be able to have the sight lines for communication. So like, what is your strategy looking at this space whenever you first kind of walked in and said, hey, yeah, I could make this work. I could see this happening. Like what was your strategy?
Well, the building's fairly narrow. I would like it to be wider, but it's not. So I remember being at a MixCoach weekend and seeing some of the stuff that Kevin had built, some of the traps, and I decided I was going to build my own gobos, and we made them big and thick and heavy, and we just built workstations along each wall. There's really 2 guitar workstations, a bass workstation, a keyboard workstation, and a piano workstation kind of combined. And then the drums are out just basically open in the room. And these little workstations are just basically gobos cordoning everybody off. I've learned from the past that you don't want to overdrive a room, especially when you're recording with a bunch of musicians. So, one of the things you have to be mindful of is volume. I have a lot of small guitar amplifiers here. Try and get people to use those rather than them bringing in a Marshall or a big Fender Twin that's 80 watts. And when you don't drive the room so hard, you don't get as much leakage. And, some leakage is good. I'm all for leakage. But, if as long as you don't overplay the room, it really, you can get pretty tight sound.
Very cool. Very cool. So along those lines, like, as far as microphones go, and you kind of went into some of your amplifiers and gear that's there. Speaking, we're all kind of into the gear. I'll just lay it out there like that. We're into the gear. What's kind of your favorite kind of things that you've got going on? Be it an instrument or be it microphones, that sort of thing. What kind of cool things do you have kind of that really work out well for you?
Well, one of the coolest things I think I have is a vintage Gretsch drum kit. One of the guys that I work with, who's a producer in the studio, actually plays drums for Brooks and Dunn and Reba McEntire. And he's got a collection of drums like you would not believe. And he brought in this vintage kit for us to use. And it just sounds, you put a microphone in front of it and it's there. There's no need for compression or EQ. It just sounds wonderful. And, I've got a lot of software and I've got a lot of mic pre's. I'm certainly a gearhead. I've got some Neve clones and some Neve stuff, and some Universal Audio, some John Hardy, lots of microphones. I have a partner that works for Sweetwater, and he gets us a deal on microphones. So we have a U87, we have a Royers, we have a full complement of microphones. But really, I'm really starting to learn the more expensive gear you have, you can do a lot with less. You really can. The right player in the right spot. You don't need a $2,000 microphone. You can do it with a $150 microphone and sound just as good. Placement is everything.
Yeah, that's the thing about like even the instrument that you just mentioned. Like it just kind of clicked in my brain where it's like, that's something that we talk about all the time on this podcast and over on MixCoach Pro Member, as well as at the Experience Weekends and things. A lot of it comes down to the quality of the source, and so having a good quality drum kit, having a room that you kind of have over time felt out the issues with, and it's like you are at least aware of them, to where it's like, I'll compensate with this, or I'll tweak this small little thing. And so a lot of it comes down to the source, the instrument and the player, and so like that's super interesting. The drum kit, as well as you said, like your guitar amps. Like if you can kind of lean people towards those guitar amps, and obviously like those will sound really good in that room. So that's really interesting, man. I like that workflow a lot.
The one caveat to all that is I do have because I'm a bass player, I have a great big old Ampeg bass amp, an SVT vintage reissue with the big 10-inch speakers. They call it the refrigerator, and that one you got to be careful with because it gets loud quick.
Yeah, you turn it up to like we're turning it up to 2. And it's like no doubt. I can totally see that filling up the space, man.
Yeah,
that's
no
awesome.
Doubt.
So I guess like the next question that I had, hey, Kev, did you have a thought there?
No, I was just going to say, if you have that big refrigerator, you could say, well, I can turn it down to 1.5, but
That's amazing.
that's
like
as low as I can go.
You know, the sub that I use currently, it's interesting. Like I keep it really low, but it's like it fills up my big mix room really well. But I have it like at a 1. Like it's really very low. And it's like I can't imagine the room that I would have to be in to crank it up to 9 or 10 or something like that. I really can't imagine. But anyway, so I guess like the next question that I have is like, Kev, like whenever you went to the studio, whenever you kind of walked in and you saw this gorgeous 20-foot ceiling space and these types of things, like what were some of the things that you kind of looked for whenever you were addressing this and like looking at the workflow and thinking through things along those terms? What was the first thing? Because we always talk about on this podcast and everywhere that if you can identify like what's the one thing you would change, then it's like, and a lot of times it's a really small thing, but it'll make a world of difference. What was that thing, and what were you thinking whenever you kind of walked in?
I don't think there was anything I would have changed. And Andy, remember we talked about, I was really impressed with the studio, and I could see myself working in your studio or in a studio like yours a lot. As a matter of fact, I was jotting down notes about your studio, about when I build mine. One thing I want to take just a little bit of a side road here is that one thing I have noticed lately. You remember a couple years ago, my studio flooded and I had to rebuild it. And in the meantime, I had to move up to an extra bedroom and literally set my little control surface at the time, the little Avid artist series, set it on a desktop and work that way. And I just remember, feeling uninspired as far as working, and it was miserable. It was honestly miserable. And to fast forward a couple of years, I'm also in a position right now because I'm actually building another studio right now, and I'm in between studios, in between houses. We just bought a house, and the house is not big enough to put a studio in, but I just remembered suddenly what it felt like a few years ago when I had to rebuild my studio and how uninspired sometimes you can be unless you kind of, turn the lights off, buy some LED lights maybe. And I just remember walking into Andy's studio, and it's called Dirty White Couch Studio. Is that right?
That's correct.
Andy?
Yeah. That was.
Yeah. So I just remember walking in Dirty White Couch Studio, and I saw the white couch right there in the back, and I was just thinking, man, this is so vibey. I feel inspired, and I just remember feeling inspired when I walked in. And another cool thing that I found is that, Andy, you have a little chalkboard, like a door-sized chalkboard that has all of the headphone routing, like lead vocal number 1, drums number 2, and I just thought how clever that is, and how homey it feels, and how they had the kitchen or the little you had a lot of shiplap on the wall and stuff. So I didn't really see anything short of maybe I mentioned a couple of suggestions for trapping a corner.
Yeah,
and I think you've even got some theater curtains that have a kind of like a backstory too. And we talked about how you could utilize some of those theater curtains for the story and for some bass trapping. Do you remember some of our conversation on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, we're in the process of doing it right now. So cool. that was some really good information, and I truly appreciated it. I learned a lot from having you there. I really did. And we can get into that whenever you're ready.
So tell me a little bit about this theater curtain. First of all, like that's interesting. I love the idea of having a theater curtain. It's very acoustic, absorptive, that sort of thing. So tell me about the history of the theater curtain for Dirty White Couch Studios.
It was in a vaudeville theater from the early 1900s in Fort Wayne, Indiana. My friend's wife actually worked for the ballet, and they used this theater quite a bit. And it was just an old theater curtain that they had in the basement. It was 40 by 80 each section. Wow. That's 40 feet by 80 feet. And they said we could have it, but we had to cut it up to get it out. And it took days to cut it all up and drag it all out. And we brought it up here, and we didn't really. I don't like foam. I don't like the looks of foam. Nothing against Orlex or anything like that, but I just wanted something a little more vibey. So we went with this curtain, which is really heavy and really dense, and it seems to work really well. It really does. We just kind of staggered it around the room, and but it looks really cool. And you shine a light on it, and it really comes alive.
That's super cool, man. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So Andy, from your perspective, whenever Kev came, what were you hoping to kind of get from that type of thing? And then what were some maybe of, this corner, the changes with that corner? What was that an issue that you knew about going in and were, saying, hey, is this something that I need to investigate? Or what essentially, from your perspective with having someone come into your studio is always kind of especially another audio engineer, is always interesting and very informative and very scary at the same time.
Oh, it was extremely intimidating, believe me. And I know Kevin for a while now, and I consider him a friend, but it's still having somebody of his caliber walk in your place and not judge you, but take a look at it. It was very intimidating, but he kind of just came in and looked at my setup, and I explained our signal flow, which is probably a little different than some studios, but it works good for us. We're a production studio. I mean, we run people in, and we use a lot of the same microphones for the same things, so we leave them set up. Our Snake feeds right into our board and into our mic pre's. And if you want to use the Neve 511, you use channel 19 on the Snake. It's hardwired in. Boom, you're done. We do have a patch bay, but he came in and really made me feel validated. He took a look at the setup and complimented me on it, and really didn't have any criticisms for the way I was routing signal or anything like that. We did have a professional help us set up our patch bay so that it actually made sense, because nothing worse than trying to fumble around a patch bay when you don't know what you're doing. But
agreed.
Yeah, and but he did come in and help us. I had told him that I was having some problem with some bottom end, and he made some suggestions as far as trapping in the corners and where it should be done. And it was that was very informative. That's just one of the things I got out of him being there. And I don't think Kevin fully appreciated how much I actually got out of all this. But I think he felt a little like, well, you know what you're doing. You've got it going. What can I bring to the table? Well, the fact that he was here, he looked around. He made some suggestions. But what I did was I put him to work. I had a session that day, and I had a singer come in, and I said, Kevin, I want to watch you work. I want to watch you work this vocal session. I'm going to stand back, and I want you to take over, and I want to watch you. And it was unbelievably informative. The psychology behind what he does when he coaches people is not something you can get out of a book or a magazine or a video. I learned a lot just watching him, the way he greeted the artists, how he made sure that the headphones were right, the way he kind of, introduced himself and they got to know each other a little bit, the way he, asked him what was the song about, what are you trying to get out of it, what are you doing, and there, just the way he works, you can tell he's done this a million times, but he seems to extract things out of somebody that I would normally not have done. He got to know Paul, the singer. He, when he was tracking these songs, he never sat down once. He sat there and watched them and kind of bobbed his head when he was singing. Didn't really make dead eye contact with them, but just let him know that he was doing well, and gave the poor guy some confidence, because it's kind of intimidating being a somewhat small time singer and having somebody a national engineer standing in front of you trying to get you to sing. But Paul, after the fact, said, this was really cool, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was intimidated at first, but by the time I left, I was comfortable with him. And that's the type of stuff you don't get out of a book or a magazine, or even in recording schools. I went to a recording school back in the 80s, and they never touch any of that stuff. It was more about turning this screw to adjust the azimuth on a tape machine or something like that. But, which doesn't even matter anymore. But, watching somebody work like that, that's priceless, man. It really is.
Yeah, definitely. And it can really inform, the vibe that you put out. Kev mentioned he was taking notes on the vibe of your place and kind of the simplicity of things. I love the idea. I mean, it makes complete sense. But having the chalkboard with, like you said, with the routing, like the talkback routing or the headphone routing, that stuff. That stuff is kind of intangible things that just immediately make people comfortable. Because it's like if you ever have a question, it's right there on the wall. That sort of thing. So that makes complete sense. Rather than having to write on individual people's things or whatever. Being all in the same room there, that that kind of helps out a lot of things, and kind of compensates for any of the downfalls of being in the same room, that sort of thing. So that's really cool, man. I love the idea of these intangible things of like, you know, the vibe of a studio and the creativity that it makes you want to be creative in that space, as well as like being a type of person, and being there, sitting there in front of, you know, producing a vocal and them wanting to be creative with you in that space because you want to be creative with them. So I love the idea that all of this kind of ropes back around to a lot of intangible things and a lot of kind of baseline, you know, just cool things rather than it being about a workflow or a signal path or anything like that as well. Like the things that, you know, the takeaways from a lot of the best sessions can be these intangible things.
Yeah. You know, we talked about your studio. I remember when you found your studio, when the building that it's in, and then we were talking on MixCoach, and you were saying, "Hey, what do you think about where should I put the control room?" And we we talked about the idea of leaving it all open, and that was I think a brilliant decision on your part. But I wanted to one of the things we talked about too was the ability to be able to attract people into your studio, because you're in the position like a lot of people are who own studios. You've got a great studio, but it's not in New York City, it's not in Nashville, it's not in LA, it's not in even, you know, Austin or wherever these hotbeds of music are.
Sure.
Now, there's stuff going on there. So talk a little bit about how you keep clients coming in there, because I remember when you were taking me to the airport, you were talking about, you know, I've got a good amount of work. I mean, we could always use more work, but you've got plenty of work. Why don't you kind of tell me, John, and some of the guys listening, maybe some of the ways you get some work?
Well, you know, it's interesting. When I first opened up, I didn't have any work, and I had a name back in the earlier days and was known for owning studios and doing work. But my arrogance let me believe that was still the case. And when I opened up, we were dead. I mean, I couldn't get anybody in here. But, you know, you told me once about, you know, there's a music scene everywhere. There's a music scene in every town in the United States. It's finding it. It's tapping into it. And that was the trick. I got lucky, and a friend of mine, the drummer from Brooks and Dunn, I had caught up with him one day, and we were talking, and I invited him up to my studio to take a look at it. He walked in and just said, "Oh my God, this is exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to start using this studio. I'm going to start shuffling work through here." And we worked out a deal, and he pays me. I engineer everything. He pays me directly. He works with clients. He produces stuff. But from that, I've gotten just a ton of work of outside people and people coming back, or people wanting to do more stuff without getting him involved in it. And I just can't help but say that the lack of a space or the lack of the equipment, that's no excuse. There's work out there that you don't know about. You just have to go get it. You don't have to have the biggest studio, although they're nice. You know, I would love to have Ron's studio, but that's not in the cards for me. But you know, it's out there. It really is. You just have to tap into the music scene. You know, I'm getting up there in age, and I don't go out on weekends to watch bands much anymore, other than when I'm playing. And I started doing that, and I started seeing people that I've known for 20, 30 years, haven't seen in a long time. And that just kind of snowballed into the point where I'm pretty booked up right now. I mean, if you wanted to do a session with me, I would have to say I'm at least 3 weeks out at this point.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so
that's really good. I'm very I'm so proud of that fact, because you know you're evidence that that having a cool studio is one thing, and you've got that, but fostering relationships with other artists and producers, that's another part of it that you've gotten down pat too. So
Absolutely.
I'm really proud of the fact that you're so busy right now.
Well, you kind of told me that a long time ago in a conversation, but It's out there. It is. You may not realize it. You may not know where it's at, but it's out there. People are making music and people are recording. You may think it's not going on in your hometown, but you're wrong. It is. And somebody else is getting it. And you need to get out there and get it yourself if you want it.
I love it. I mean, that's one of those things, like you said, it's kind of an intangible thing as well, where it's about the relationships, and it's about the building that trust and things with the people around you. So yeah, it's a really, I mean, it's an inspiring thing, and then it's also like you struggled to find a location too, like you for the longest time. I remember talking to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, well, I'm looking at this, such and such an empty church building, but we can't use that because of the business licenses and things like that. So there was, there was a lot of time that you spent kind of looking for the right place. And so I'm excited that whenever you saw this place, which traditionally, like, you would walk into a place where I guess there's like, well, there's no control room. And you might think, hey, I'm just going to write this one off as another one of the ones that didn't work. Another one of the places that I looked at that didn't work. But you kind of looked at it and you said, no, let me look at this from a different angle and think this could be a positive thing. Like, I could use this as a cool marketing thing and have the coolest, vibiest space for bands and for artists and that sort of thing. So I applaud you for that too. Kind of thinking outside the box whenever even a location was kind of hard in your area.
Well, I had looked and looked and looked and looked, and I came to the realization there's not a perfect studio out there. There's not a prefab studio waiting for me to take it over. I had to create something.
Wow.
It just wasn't there, and so I just had to make it happen. So I urge everybody that wants to do something like this, just make it happen. Just take a chance and do it.
I love it.
Yeah, we've
great advice.
just going back to what we were talking about before, some of the business I've gotten is outside the box. I did an audio book for a guy who wrote a book about solar energy.
Very cool.
I'm just in the final throes of mixing a soundtrack for a book, or for a documentary. Had the son of Phil Lesh, the Grateful Dead bassist, in here with his band, and I got to play some of that for Kevin. That was fun. And
that's awesome.
So there's a lot more out there than just band demos or CDs. I mean, there's lots of work out there if you're willing to just go get it.
So Andy, I guess in wrap up, I mean, this has been an amazing chat. So thank you, first of all, for joining us for this call and for this podcast. The last thing I wanted to ask was, how can people get in contact with you if they want to book your studio, if they want to, check out your services or anything like that? How do people reach you?
Several ways. You can go to my website, www.dirtywhitecouchstudio.com, or you can email me at dirtywhitecouchstudio@yahoo.com. Those are probably two of the easiest ways to get a hold of me. I'm on Facebook. There's a Dirty White Couch Facebook page, and I welcome any of the MixCoach guys if they ever want to come up here and check the place out, sit in on a session, or use the place. This place is always available.
Awesome. Final question that just sprung in my head.
Yeah.
Dirty White Couch, where does it come from?
Our original studio had a dirty white couch in it. It was a white couch that we had that we let people sit on while we were trying to mix and track. And there just so happened to be a rib joint next door to our place. So people would go over there and get ribs and come back to the studio and wipe their hands on the couch when they were done. And at one point, the couch was so dirty, we were looking for a new name for the studio. We just called it Dirty White Couch because that's what it was.
That's amazing. And is it the same couch, the same white couch that's in your studio now? Has it been bleached and is it still the same couch?
Well, no, the original couch we had to burn in effigy because it was pretty nasty. But this is the second Dirty White Couch. You wouldn't want to sit on it.
I love it. Well, it's been really fun to talk to you, man. It's been great.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to check out your studio, Dirty White Couch Studio, and thank you again for sitting down for a little while here and chatting with us, man.
I appreciate it, and everybody come to the MixCoach weekend.
Thank you for listening to the MixCoach podcast. Make sure to head over to your podcast service of choice and rate and review the show.